Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. As you can see by the title of this one, I've called it Searching for Duck Reach, and I probably should explain that before I get into the substance of what it is that I want to talk about. Duck Reach is a disused or decommissioned hydroelectric power station on the South Esk River, up beyond the first basin in the Cataract Gorge. And I had set out with the intention of riding to where the power station is, or riding to the car park above the power station, and then making a video walking through the power station, explaining various features and pointing them out and so on, and then riding back home. Now in this video, which is the ride to the power station, it appears that I am sort of riding around aimlessly with no sense of direction, and to a certain extent that's true, so I should own up to all that before I go any further. I had been to the power station several times before. I've walked there from the gorge, from the first basin, and I've also, for those who live locally, come to the power station from the Tavallan side, from the Reedy Creek walking fire trail, and down the very steep steps to the power station, so I'm familiar with where it was. I have also walked there by road in the past, so I thought I was reasonably familiar with it and thought I had a bit of a picture in my mind of where I should go. Just to make sure, I consulted Google Maps and where is, and got some directions and so on, and again I thought I had all that imprinted in my mind, and so I set off. Now I don't have a phone holder to attach to the windshield of or the screen of my motorcycle, and obviously for safety reasons I can't hold my phone in my hand while I'm riding, and never mind it being illegal, I can't do it because I need both hands to operate the brakes. So as I say, I thought I knew where I was going, and it turned out I made a couple of wrong turns and I seemed to be driving around aimlessly in circles for a while, so I just ask you to bear with me. I did eventually reach the power station and make the video, and then I rode back. Now the significance of the power station, and that's not really the substance of what I want to talk about, but I'll just give you the context here. The significance of this power station is that it was the first hydroelectric power station in Tasmania and also in Australia, and it provided light and electricity to Tasmania. It was built in 1896. It was severely damaged in floods in 1929, and the suspension bridge which leads to it was also severely damaged again in the 1969 floods and rebuilt both times. As I said, the power station has now been decommissioned, but you can go there and look around and learn about hydroelectricity and learn about how the power station operated and so on. So that's to give you a context of what I was doing and where I was going on this ride, but it's not really the substance of what I wanted to talk about. I thought what I would do today is talk a little bit about trikes and the various things that are involved in riding a trike and getting a license for a trike. And I'm prompted to do this for a couple of reasons. One is I saw on my Facebook feed, the place where everybody gets their news these days, some advertising for stay upright courses for trikes, and I thought that was a particularly good idea because obviously the skill set that you require to ride a trike is different from the skill set you require to ride a two-wheel motorcycle. I'll come back to the types of trikes in a moment because there are different types of trikes. But the first reason was I saw this advertising and thought that's a pretty good idea, because there were people who want to just ride a trike, and there are some trikes that are learner legal, LAMS, learner approved motorcycle scheme, and so for people to take some special training just to be able to ride a trike would be a good thing. The second reason that I thought I would talk about this is that I had seen a trike for sale. I was just looking around in motorcycle sales, and I came across this trike, and the seller had commented that you could ride the trike on a car license, and that got me to thinking whether that's actually true or not. And as far as I can determine, it isn't true, with the exception of one or two learner approved trikes. Alright, so let's talk about the types of trike. Now just to explain that further, I don't think the person was being dishonest. I think perhaps when they bought the trike, that may have been the rule, that may have been the situation. You could drive these trikes on a car licence, but the research that I have done, or tried to do to find out the answer to that question, is that certainly in New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, for the most part, it is not possible to ride a trike without having a motorcycle licence and without having done a motorcycle safety course, a stay upright course. Some years ago, the transport ministers all got together and decided to reclassify the traditional sorts of trikes, that is the ones with the two wheels at the back, that are brands like Bontrike and Ray Wecco. They decided to reclassify those as motorcycles because they had handlebars and an open chassis, and therefore they decided, well, if they are classified as motorcycles, you have to take a motorcycle training course to ride one. So as I said, there are different types of trikes. There are those two wheels at the back. When I was a kid, people often had a little tricycle type thing called a dinky. It had two wheels at the back and one wheel at the front, and the wheel at the front had pedals on it. And as you got a bit older, you got a bigger version of that before you got a bicycle. So the traditional trike looks like that. It has two wheels at the back, one wheel at the front. It has a very long rake in the front wheel, and I think that's not only for design purposes, but also so the rider can be down quite low in the seat and the passengers can be above the rider and see what's going on, enjoy the scenery and so on. Generally those trikes are powered by VW motors, but not always. Sometimes I've seen them with Ford and Subaru motors as well. Generally they are 3 or 4 speed manual transmissions, although I have seen some automatics available as well. But the big feature of those bikes, as well as their long wheelbase and the long rake on the front fork, is that the engine is at the back. So that means the front of the bike is quite light and the engine is at the back. They come in a couple of configurations. That is, there is a solo version, in other words, just a rider. Another configuration is to have a one passenger in a single seat behind the rider, up higher than the rider, but behind the rider. And then you can have combinations where there are 2 seats or even 3 seats for passengers. And some of those trikes also have seat belts. I'm not sure if the seat belts are a requirement or just an extra safety feature that people have added. There are people who own these and use them as their weekend rides and belong to clubs and so on, but there are also people who have these sort of trikes and use them as to do tourism guides around towns and so on. I once went on a ride on one, I can't remember how many years ago, but it was quite a long time ago, in South Australia, in Victor Harbour. A bloke used to, he had room on the back for 3 passengers, so my wife and I and our granddaughter, we went for a ride around Victor Harbour and he showed us the sights and so on. We all had helmets and jackets and there were seat belts, lap sash for the 2 outbound passengers, and the middle passengers had the one across the lap. Now I imagine because of the long rake of the front wheel and the handlebar set up, that they handle in a certain way, and the weight of the bike would tend to suggest, because all the weight's at the back, I have not ridden one or driven one, but I would imagine that there are certain dynamics about handling one of these and handling all that weight at the back. Obviously, because they have that setup of 2 wheels at the back, they don't lean, they don't do any of the things that a 2-wheel motorcycle would do, and so there are a certain set of skills in learning to ride one. Now the engine size, I think, usually goes from about 1200 up to about 1600, although I have seen some 2-litre ones, and they're not learner legal. There is also a Harley Davidson, which I think is called the Ultra Glide, and there's another model, which I can't remember the name of, that's very similar, and they have 2 wheels at the front. They look like a Harley Davidson in every other way, and the engine is generally mostly positioned under the rider, so the weight is towards the centre of the frame of the bike. And I again imagine the dynamics of riding and driving one of those is different from riding the earlier model, the earlier trikes that I was talking about, and also different from riding a 2-wheel motorcycle. Now, the ones that I am familiar with mostly are what are called Y formation trikes. That is the ones that have 2 wheels at the front and one at the back. Now they are mainly made by a Canadian company called BRP, which is Bombardier Recreational Products. They also make jet skis and skidoos and stuff, and the trikes they make are called Can-Ams, and they come in two forms: the Spider, which is a larger version with the 1330 3-cylinder Rotax engine and a 6-speed semi-automatic transmission, and then there is a smaller one which is called the Ryker, and the Ryker comes, I think, in 3 configurations: 600, 900 and 900 Sports. Now the 600 is learner legal. It has, as I said, 2 wheels at the front and 1 at the back. It is belt driven. It has a constantly variable transmission, or a CVT transmission, so a twist and go transmission like a scooter. It also has a fully functioning reverse gear, and because its wheels are set well apart, it doesn't work like a motorcycle at all. It doesn't lean. It has independent suspension on both wheels, wishbones and shock absorbers, and although I've never ridden a quad, I'm told riding them is like riding a quad. I own a Can-Am Spider RT. The RT, I think, stands for Road Tourer, and it's quite a solid bike, and you have to do a lot of work. You have to lean your body into the corner that you want to, or the turn that you want to go, rather than lean the bike. So there are a certain set of skills that are required to learn to ride one of those bikes. And as I said, the Can-Am Ryker, the 600, is learner legal. So you could go and take a trike course, borrow someone else's Ryker for the day, because you have to provide your own trike, and then get your licence. Now in New South Wales, if you get a trike licence, you get an endorsement on your licence that says you can only ride a trike. It's called an X125 endorsement. I don't know what the X125 refers to, other than to say it means you can only ride a trike. And you can only, until you're fully licensed, you can only ride the Ryker 600. When your licence is fully up, you could ride the 900, but you couldn't ride one of those Rayweco ones because they have a manual transmission with a clutch and a shifter, and you haven't done the training for that, so you would have to do extra training. You could, I suspect, ride the Can-Am Spider, because the Can-Am Spider has a semi-automatic transmission, has a flappy paddle transmission, which you actually have to change up each gear using your thumb, but when you want to change down, if you just close the throttle and put your foot on the brake, the bike will automatically change down by itself. So that's the second type of trike. And I'm told, I know that the Spiders are really meant for open road touring and getting out on the road and seeing the countryside. They're certainly not the sort of bike you would just buy as a commuter bike, because they're big. The one I have is, like I said, it's the RT, and it weighs about 450 kilos. Their front wheels are almost as far apart as a small hatch, so they're not the sort of bikes you would zip in and out of the traffic with. The Rykers, the 600 and the 900, they are aimed at the commuter market, but being 600 and 900, they would, I feel, be okay for your weekend away, or if you want to do a road trip. I believe you can get a single setup or a pillion setup on the Rykers, but as I don't own one, I'm not 100% certain. And all of the information I'm giving you here, you need to check with your local authority in your own state as to what exactly the rules are before you go into this, if you're thinking about getting a trike licence, because there are then, even though all those things that I've said, there are then some further restrictions. For example, in Queensland, once you've passed the stay upright course, you have to do 90 hours, I think, of riding before you can go for your test and go for your licence, and you have to be accompanied by a licensed rider. I don't know how they police all of that, and whether there's a logbook you've got to keep or something like that, but that's a restriction that doesn't, to my knowledge, exist in other states. Now there is a third type of three-wheeled motorcycle, and that is, some examples of that are the Piaggio MP3, which I think starts at 250, comes out in your urban as 300, there's a 400, and there's a Galera, which is the same company, only a different badge, and it has a 550. Peugeot, the car maker, also make a similar type of machine. These machines have 2 wheels at the front. The 2 wheels are quite close together though, so they're not as wide apart as they would be on the Ryker or on the Can-Am Spider. And some other examples of this type of machine are the Yamaha Tri-City, I think it's called, and also the Yamaha Tekken. The Yamaha Tekken to me always looks like a transformer. I think it is learner legal, but you'd need to check with your local state before if you were thinking of getting one. These bikes have, as I said, two wheels at the front, and in the case of the Piaggio, and I think the Tri-City and certainly the Peugeot model, they have a unique feature in that when the bike is travelling at less than 5 kilometres an hour, there's a switch on the handlebar which allows you to lock the front suspension. Now, when I say that, doesn't lock it so it won't bounce up and down and absorb shock, but it allows you to lock the front suspension so the bike will stay upright. And so when you come to a dead stop at a traffic light or a give way sign or something like that, you don't have to put your feet down. Now, you could see, thinking about that would be a great advantage to a person who hadn't ridden and was worried about trying to hold up the weight of a heavy, large bike, even up to a 650, which you can ride as a learner. And also would be an advantage for an older person who was thinking, well, I had this really big bike. For example, I had a Kawasaki 1700 Voyager, and it was getting to the stage where it was just getting too heavy for me to get up off the stand and hold it and manoeuvre it while I was riding around roundabouts and giveaway signs in my town before I got out on the road. So I sold it and to my son actually, and got the Can-Am Spider because I wanted to keep riding. So you could see that if you had the Piaggio 250, 300, 400 or 550 and you were an experienced rider, that situation of not having to put your feet down at the traffic lights and the bike would stay upright by itself would be a great advantage. Now that system works, you just push the switch when the bike is below 5 kilometres an hour. So you're coming up at the traffic lights, you see it there red, you slow down your speed, you're below 5 kilometres an hour, push the switch, and providing the bike is perpendicular to the road, in other words perfectly upright, not leaning in any way, the suspension will lock and the bike will stay upright. It'll stay upright if it's leaning slightly, but what will happen is when you twist the throttle, when the light turns green and you twist the throttle, the lock comes off, and if the bike was leaning slightly, it might tend to topple over and you get a little bit spooked by that happening. So make sure the bike is perfectly upright, perpendicular to the road, before you engage the locking mechanism. I suspect that lots of people who ride them do it without engaging the locking mechanism, and then only after they're well and truly confident riding the bike do they engage that locking mechanism. I remember once I had a Piaggio 400 for a little while. We bought it for my wife to learn and hoped that she'd get the bug, and she didn't, so we sold it. But when I was taken for a test drive, I came to a set of traffic lights, and on my right was a bloke on a two-wheel scooter, and I had locked this thing so my feet weren't down, and I made a point of sort of drawing his attention to the fact that this had the two wheels at the front and my feet were still up on the floorboards. So the two wheels at the front, that sort of trike is an advantage in that it allows you it gives you extra traction, of course, because you've got two wheels at the front. In every other regard, it works exactly like a motorcycle. In other words, it leans, it tilts, it counter steers. Everything you can do on your motorcycle, you can do on these ones with the two wheels at the front. But they have this added advantage of the extra wheel, which, as I said, provides a little bit more traction and might help to smooth out some of the bumps in the road, because hopefully both wheels won't end up in the pothole when you see one, and gives you that extra bit of, security when you're at the traffic lights, that your bike will stay upright. You don't need to, if you want to park them, of course, you can just put them on you can put them on the stand if you've got a centre stand and a side stand, but you don't need to. You can just lock the suspension and put on the handbrake, and the bike will stay as it is. As I said, I had a Piaggio 400 for a while, and I found that it was quite good at being out on the open road, on the freeway and on the highway. I bought it in Sydney and drove it to my home in Goulburn, which is about 200 kilometres, and it held its own against the trucks and everybody else that was roaring down the freeway at 110. I found that the power band was more available at the top of the power band. If you think of it like a curve, at the top of the curve is where most of the power was, rather than I have a Suzuki Bergman 650 scooter at the moment, and its power band, it comes all the way across. It's more smooth, it's smoother, and it's available all the way across the range of the bike from low down to high speed. Now, I said earlier that I expect that there are certain dynamics about riding trikes that don't apply to two-wheel bicycles. Like I said, I haven't ridden one of those trikes with the wheel at the front and the great big long front fork. As I said, I was a passenger in one in South Australia a good few years ago, and I did notice a little bit of sort of sway in the back seat where I was, but I have nothing to compare to because I haven't sat on the back of any other bike either. I've always been the rider, so I don't know if that's just a feature that I noticed or a feature of those bikes, but you can imagine that there is quite a distance between the handlebars and the rider and the front wheel, and I imagine it takes you a bit of getting used to that length of the fork and the rake of the fork and the way that the bike responds to turning the handlebars and so on. And as I said, with all the weight at the back of the bike, they obviously are rear wheel. Well, all motorcycles, I guess, are rear wheel. These ones have I guess mostly have a diff, although I think some of them can be also change room, but I think they mostly have a diff set up like a car. And so I imagine that the certain skills and dynamics about riding one of those are well worth taking a course to learn before you think about doing it. Now, before you actually buy the machine and decide you're going to ride off on one. The Rikers and Can-Am Spyders, again, they have the two wheels at the front. The Can-Am Spyders have an entire alphabet of safety features that do their very best to prevent the rider from doing stupid things. We know that you can't legislate against stupidity, and that any machine from a toaster through to the space shuttle is only as good as the person who uses it. So with all the best of intentions and all the safety features in the world, if the person who's behind the wheel or behind the handlebars is determined to do something stupid, then the bike won't save you from those. But the Can-Am Spyders and the Rikers have a whole suite of safety features. They have traction control, they have ABS, they have EDB. The Spyders have dynamic power steering as well, and they have a system which senses when you go into a curve. If you're travelling too fast, what they think is too fast, what the computers in the bike think are too fast, it will reduce power to the wheel, to the one of the wheels, to bring you under control and keep you on a good line. As I said, a little bit like riding I'm told a little bit like riding a quad, which I've never done, but it's the leaning of the body forward and in the direction that you want to go. So if you want to turn right, you lean your body forward and to the right, as well as turning the handlebars by pushing your left arm out and pulling your right arm in at the same time, and the bike will then steer itself around the corner and do the opposite, of course, if you're going left. One thing I've noticed about them is that when you're turning left, there is less of the I think it's called centripetal force, the force that pushes you back off the seat when you're turning left, and I think that's because when we turn left, we generally don't make a full 90-degree turn. You can make a turn that's less angled, and because we drive on the left and the camber of the road is to the left, it's not necessary to lean quite as far forward and to the left as you would when you want to make a right-hand turn. So imagine going through a roundabout and you're making a 270-degree turn, so you're coming straight ahead, and instead of taking the first exit, which will be left at 90 degrees, or going straight ahead and at 180, you're going to go around to the third exit, and so you're making a 270-degree turn. In that case, you're going to need to lean fairly forward and to the right, and lean and sort of direct the bike around the corner, and you'll find that it takes a little bit of getting used to in your body, and it takes you a little bit of getting used to understanding how the bike is working and what it's trying to do. And you turn left at that same roundabout, you could, as I said, not necessarily make a full 90-degree turn, and so it's much easier. So if you decide you want to ride a trike, then there are some, that is the Piaggios, there's a Peugeot one, the Yamaha Tri-City, I think the Yamaha Tekken, and the Can-Am Ryker 600 that are all learner legal. You can take a course and get a license, or get a learner's permit, and do your on-road training and then go for your licence eventually, and you will have then an endorsement on your licence that says you can only ride a trike, and in the same way as if you go for your car licence and you go in an automatic car, you have an endorsement on your licence that says you can only drive an automatic car. If you go for your motorcycle licence and you go on a scooter, because they have a constantly variable transmission, or CVT, you also get an endorsement on your licence that says automatic only. So you can't ride a motorcycle that has a heel and toe or a toe shifter and a clutch, because you haven't done the appropriate training for managing the clutch and managing the shifting lever as well. Now, the Ray Wecco and Bond trike, that is the one at the front, two wheels at the back type of trike, they have a foot-operated brake for the rear brakes. They have I think, a hand-operated front brake for the disc on the front brake, and they also have a foot-operated clutch. So in many ways, some of the features are like driving a car, and the shifter for the gearbox is usually on the driver's left-hand side somewhere. It's certainly not beside him like you'd find in a car, but it is down on the left-hand side within reach. And once you get used to the H setup, that is the feature of manual transmissions, you'll probably be pretty right with that. So there's some information about trikes and different ways of riding them and the requirements for getting a licence. So you've got to go and take this stay upright course, which I think is a 2-day course, and then you'll get a certificate. If you don't already have a car licence, you'll have to go and then take the road hazards test. That's a computer test at the licensing authority in your state to see what you know about the road rules and hazard perceptions and so on and so forth, and then you'll get a learner's permit. And again, depending on your state, like I said, in Queensland you've got to do 90 hours and you've got to go with a licensed rider. Other states you can just ride by yourself, and then you can go for your licence. And the licence, when you go for your licence, there'll be a series of skills that you'll put through, similar to the skills that you will put through on your training for your certificate. And I think a fail on any one of them means you fail the course, and then you've got to take the whole thing all over again. So things to think about if you're buying a trike, as well as the fact that some are learner legal and some aren't, and think about the costs, what sort of riding you're going to do, and make sure you can afford the safety equipment that goes with them. Now I'm just coming towards the end of this part one of this ride, and I'm coming up to the car park for the Duck Reach power station on Corbin Street in West Launceston, I think would be the correct name for where I am. So I'm just going to pull in there in a moment and see me park the bike, and then the second part of this video, which I will post at a later date, will see me riding home. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the information useful and interesting, and maybe I'll see you out on the road one day on your trike.